Once upon a time, there was a kid named Andy who loved sailing. Andy read and reread a book about a guy who sailed all the way around the world. He thought, how amazing would that be? Andy grew up to have a great life with some amazing children he wanted to be an example for, and he built a fulfilling career serving others, coaching Olympians and some of the greatest athletes in the world, coaching college students and young entrepreneurs and business people and teachers and fellow coaches. Over the more than 3 decades of Coach Andrew's career, he's had an incredibly positive impact on thousands of lives, all while helping people achieve their dreams. Now, Andrew is embarking on a dream of his own, sailing around the world in the Clipper Round the World race. 42,000 miles, 11 months sailing the globe, sailing into port on 6 of the world's 7 continents. It's the adventure of a lifetime, young Andy's dream manifested by Andrew's ongoing belief and positive mindset. Where in the world is Andrew Moss? Let's find out. Hello, Andrew.
Hello, Kay. So nice to see you.
It's great to see you too. I love this lighting. We've got, for people watching in video, there's like this, you're using a flashlight from the boat that you use on the boat.
Yeah, one of my headlamps is acting as our mood lighting or our video lighting system right now
The
because
like ring lighting.
it's whatever time, just after 9 p.m. here in Australia, where we are.
That's right. So where in the world are you?
We're in a place called Fremantle, Australia, which is about half an hour south of Perth on the west coast of Australia. The beautiful little city of, I think, about 60, 70,000 people, sort of on the outskirts of Perth. Um, Beaches everywhere, beautiful cafes and restaurants and nightlife and shopping, and a beautiful yacht club where all of our boats are tied up and are being worked on very busily over the last week.
Wow. Yeah, I bet. After this was a really, really interesting crossing. Okay. But before we go there, I've been wondering, because you keep arriving into these what's been really fun for one of the things that's been really fun for me is like the time zones keep changing, like as you
Mm.
go further and further around the world. But this is like I had this curiosity about what it's like to arrive somewhere and again by boat, like especially by sailboat, like it's under your own power, in
Mhm, mhm.
conjunction obviously with Mother Nature. Like, what's that like?
Yeah, it's fascinating. It's a great question. It is a very unique experience. You really appreciate seeing land um, in a different way.
Mm.
And I actually had a conversation about this yesterday with the host couple of the Airbnb that we're staying in. Um, and I said to the husband, I said, yeah, when you are out in the ocean for, in our case, probably 23 days where we saw no land.
Mhm.
Um, you the idea that the Earth is 70% water
Mm.
um, becomes a real thing. In fact, you could have convinced me it's 99% water, and I would have believed you. Um, but in our day-to-day life, it would be hard pressed for people to really wrap their head around how it's possible that the Earth is 70% water when we live this land-based life.
Life.
Um, and so, yeah, I mean, being out there and seeing no land, no ships, no people, and then seeing the sort of faint outline of land in the distance, it's a remarkable feeling of
Mm.
accomplishment and of adventure and of I think a little bit of historically imagining what it might have been like for those who were some of the first people to do this, right? To
Mm.
see these places and to wonder what was on the other side of where they were about to land. Because we have the same curiosity in a lot of the places we're going, to see, what is this place all about and what are the people going to be like? And are we going to have supporters and family and friend waiting for us, or how's it all going to play out? There's a lot of unknowns as we slowly work our way towards this distant shoreline that we can see, and it's really, really special, actually.
Yeah, I hear that. Yeah.
Mm.
Um, it's so this feels like the perfect place to ask a question that I was going to ask a little later, but I think is relevant now. I came across a conversation that you had on the One Solution podcast a couple years ago.
Mhm.
And this was something that really resonated for me. This is what you said. One of the things that you said. You said, I think that healing people and the planet is from us understanding that we are all the same at a micro level, creating groups where people can have that conversation and put them in a room together, virtual or otherwise, and just let them experience what it is to hear the experience of a bunch of other people who look different, sound different, have different experiences. You said, if I could only do one thing, that would be the thing that I would start. And it comes up for
Yeah.
a couple reasons. One is because my experience is that you did actually start that, and that I'm
Mm.
one of the people in that group that you started.
Very true. Yeah, yeah. The coaching community really was a place modeled after that notion that
Mm,
yeah, the only thing that really keeps us apart as humans is this misunderstanding that we're different from one another.
mm,
Um, and my work with One Solution has taught me that lesson in a profound way, having a chance to work with the young people in Chicago and to hear their life stories and to share my life story and to talk about the struggles that each of us have and to realize that, you know, the things that we worry about and the things that matter to us, are so similar.
mm,
They might look different, but at the fundamental level of what they're about, they're the same.
mm,
And so, yeah, the coaching community is that. And it's interesting to hear you say that back, because before you said the last sentence about if there was one thing
mm,
I could do, before you said that, my mind went to, oh, that sounds like what I might want to do when we're done all this sailing business. And sure enough, yeah, maybe there's a premonition there. But that's the work that One Solution does. It's what drew me to work with them.
mm,
And I think one way or the other that will continue when I'm done this sailing race.
mm,
But it's also, as I reflect on it, it's also the reality of what I'm learning on the boat, because we have 20 random people who've been thrown together, as diverse as you could imagine, who are figuring out a lot of stuff in real time with each other and
mm,
through each other. And you see, how fear, and you see how insecurity, and you see how the need for acceptance, and you see how all of these very basic human needs, you see them play out in different ways, but at the base of them all, it's the same core needs that are trying to be met.
mm,
And it's finding a way to remind yourself of that when some of that behavior can easily get on your nerves. It can easily, um, challenge the dynamic of a team. But when you step back a little bit, you see that what it's really about is a sense of trying to figure out themselves for all of us, and me included.
mm,
Um, why are we the way we are, and what's going on, and what can we learn from these situations that we're going through? So it's, that notion from One Solution is what I've stumbled upon in many ways in joining this sailing race, that I have a group of 20 people each race who, they're going through it, whether they knew that's what they were signing up for or not. They
mhm,
are going through an unlayering of themselves that I had this conversation actually last week, maybe 4 or 5 days before we arrived, with a very successful retired doctor from the US who said to me, He said, yeah, I've learned a lot about myself on this leg, and I'm not sure I want to know that much more. He said, I have a very comfortable life back home, and I enjoy it, and I'm happy, and I
Mm,
do the things that I love to do, and I hang out with the people I love to hang out with. And this has exposed parts of me that I didn't really like.
mm,
And so that was a really fascinating conversation too about, this whole notion of self-discovery and about, also knowing our neighbors in a new way.
mm,
Um, it's hard work, and it's vulnerable work, and it's powerful work, but you have to be ready for it to
mm,
go into it. And I know you know that from your coaching experiences, when clients have to be ready. Clients can't get to where they want to get to until they make that decision to go to places that they've not gone before, and to learn things that they've
mm,
not necessarily learned before about themselves. Um, and I think what coaching is finding the right person who can give you the comfort to go there, and to
yeah.
be supported going there.
There's this wonderful idea that I, know of and reflect on quite a bit, which is we are all coming into this moment with the level of awareness that we have.
Yeah.
And I've learned, and I know this is true for you too, that people's questions are such a great indicator of where they are, but of also where they want to go. And I'm thinking
Mm.
of so for a couple of years, I worked with adolescents and then their parents in a high school nearby, and I got to connect with. There was a community night recently that I got to go to, and I was talking to one of the teachers about a particular kid who used to be completely locked up inside of themselves, and spurting out explosions of, you know, what, like when you're locked up inside, what comes out, right? It's huge, huge emotions. This teacher was so proud and it's funny because the staff thinks of themselves as also learners. There's not really a
Mm.
distinction between an authority figure teacher and a learning student, right? They're all learners. So anyway, this kid went to this teacher and said, or this staff member and said, is there is there a way for me to tell someone my feelings without them, like with my understanding now that I don't want them to get upset. I don't want them but I really want them to hear me. And this
Mm.
teacher was like, "Oh my God, what a great, like adults need this question."
Beautiful question. Yeah.
Yeah. So
Yeah. Yeah.
it's so interesting to me that like this is the experience that you have as you're seeing land and you're wondering like what's here? What are these people like? What am I going to find? And then it's also you're experiencing it on the boat,
Mm.
you know?
Yeah. 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 I mean, I think of a story. I actually went out for dinner with this crew member last night, and he was telling this story. I knew he was a successful businessman, and traveled the world and done a lot of cool things. And then one day I was helming the boat, and he was talking to the other crew and telling them a story of having grown up with very absent parents and in a very sort of poverty situation. Right. And my curiosity, my coaching curiosity was, that's a big gap, right? To
Mm,
go from that to where he's at today, where he owns homes in multiple countries, it's the whole thing.
mm,
So I asked him, I said, like, what happened? What triggered you to escape that, and how, right? And because that's a very easy trap to stay caught in for a lot of people.
mm,
And he paused for quite a long time. Um, and the story was basically that, he realized somehow that educated people did better in life. And I mean, he had some people who he had seen do that who were not necessarily related to him, but people who he admired. He said, I have to find a way to get educated, and my
mm.
parents have no money. And he went off to a great university, got a great education, became a very successful at what he does. And
Wow.
what was cool about that, and he was talking about this afterwards, was that little nugget of what's the gap between where he had started and where he is today, nobody had been curious about that before.
Mm, mm,
Right. And so the question, and this is what we do as coaches, right? We try to, what are we not, where's the puzzle not fitting right now to show us a fuller picture of what's going on?
yeah.
And to be curious about that, and to be curious in a way that's not judging what
Mm,
the answer might be, or presuming what the answer might be. It's being literally, like, absolutely curious. And I think there's a line from the Ted Lasso show. There's a scene where he's in a pub, and he gets challenged in a darts game by this sort of bad character in the show. And he talks about this Walt Whitman quote of, be curious, not judgmental,
mm.
as he shoots one dart after another, into the exact, scores that he needs to win the bet. He said, you might have wanted to be more curious about whether I've played darts before.
Oh,
And my
wow.
answer would have been, yes, I have. Right? And I love that, because it seems like such a simple notion, but I think, most humans go through life and don't show that level of curiosity about one another,
Yeah.
and don't suspend judgment until they have more information. Most of us go way too fast to
Mm,
assumption and judgment and characterizations and stuff like that. And so um, it's another thing on the boat that, people from all walks of life, different countries, different levels of experience. It's always surprising to me, the ones um, that are able to really maximize the experience that they have on the boat,
mm,
and others that seem to sort of squander it. And
mm.
so yeah, it's a
Uh,
little test tube of human nature inside a
yeah.
sailboat for, weeks on end.
I think too, something's coming up for me in my own life. So a person who I won't reveal their identity, but somebody close to me, all their life has told and believed a story about, when I was in, I believe, middle school, I hit a teacher. Can you believe that? I was such a delinquent that I hit a teacher. Oh, wow, I
Hmm.
hit this teacher. I'm such a, I got in so much trouble, blah, blah, blah. So I saw them in June of 23. And this story was coming out, right? And I for the first time ever, I think this is some sign of my journey too, as a person who's become more curious. Um, I said, why'd you hit the teacher? Do you know why he hit the teacher, Andrew? The teacher hit him. That's why he hit the teacher. I'm
Wow.
like, what? Like, I mean, it shifted the whole thing, right? Like, it's hard to look at yourself as a child and realize, like, oh wow, there were reasons why. Like, I wasn't just a bad kid. There was a
Sure.
reason. And I just thought that was really, anyway, yeah. So so on the boat, okay. Well, oh my God, there's two questions I really want to ask, but I'll go this way first because I think we'll naturally get to the other way. Um, has any, like, our conversation's kind of been about bigger things, and I'm
Yeah.
curious for you if anything has, like, I guess, what were the hopes maybe that you had going into when you started?
Hmm.
Have they shifted at all? Like, if you go out to August of next year and you're looking back, like, what was most inspiring? What was most thrilling? What did you learn? And has that shifted what you're hoping for since you started?
Yeah, it's a very timely question. Yeah, I think going into this, I would have anticipated that I would have been really um, talking about what a thrill the sailing has been, and the experience has been from a sailing perspective and from a racing perspective, and a chance to use my skills in that. Um, and the reality so far, and I say so far because it might change depending on some decisions on how I get used on the boat.
Mm.
The reality so far is it has been much more of a people management and yeah, just a sort of an HR kind of role of overseeing a bunch of people who and trying to give them the best experience they can have, trying to execute on behalf of the boat and the race as best we can. But it's been much more of the people side of it than what I would have gone into the race looking for. At the end of the day, at the end of July next year, I hope it's a little more balanced. I hope there's more of the sailing, and I hope that some of the people stuff either requires less of my attention or potentially gets shifted to somebody else to who doesn't necessarily have the sailing ability to impact the boat that I can bring, but could manage the people quite well. And I've really gotten comfortable with the idea that if that's what's best for the boat, that somebody else deal with the people side so that I can help on the sailing side more. If that's what's best for the boat and the race, which ultimately, if we're doing better in the race, it really helps the people side of things because people are in a better mood and are excited about what we're doing and are a little more motivated to get up and do the work that needs to be done. So, I think to finish the race with a more even balance between those two things would be my goal now. Yeah, we'll see how that plays out.
How come it's a timely question right now? What did you mean when you said that?
Yeah, I think, we've had a couple of legs where the sailing performance has not been what we feel we're capable of. And there has been more energy directed towards people management than what our skipper would like. And more from me and more from my counterpart, who's also one of our watch leads, more of our energy going towards managing people's emotional well-being and relationships with one another and, conflict and all those things. And he would really like to find a couple of people to really focus on the sailing side and hopefully find ways to manage some of the interpersonal stuff separately. So it's a conversation like literally this morning we had about what that might look like in different ways we could accomplish that.
I got to wondering after our last conversation, which it feels like was the leg where you were like, holy mackerel, I had no idea what I was getting into here. And there was a point where you said something like, well, the skipper really appreciates how I, the kind of way that I can nurture people. And also it gives me credibility in terms of guiding or teaching people how to, like, on the sailing side was how I interpreted what you said. And I remember thinking one day, like, why do they have to be connected? Like, couldn't there be a sailing aspect and a sort of guidance aspect?
Yeah, there definitely could be. Yeah. And and so that might be the direction that we end up going. And we're waiting to see what he decides, but we clearly need to be better on the sailing side if we want the performance to be better, because the other teams, you can see the improvement coming from the other teams. And it's not just reliant on the skipper getting better, it's reliant on the team really getting better and those who have sailing experience being even more able to contribute. And it's funny because this happens in the real world, in the business world, and in the employment world all the time, where we take really, really skilled technical people and we advance them up the hierarchy of a business and give them more and more management responsibility and more people responsibility.
Yeah, we take them away from what they love.
Exactly, right? And we take them away from that natural talent that they have And sometimes they can transfer it and they can also develop the people side. But I've seen so many people, and I was one of them in my sports coaching days, where the better I got at sports coaching, the more job offers I got, the further away I got from actually the coaching of people.
Mm,
And the more miserable I got
mm,
overall about my ability to really make an impact. And so, um, there's a little bit of that going on right now where I think my ability to impact people um, for the sailing aspect of this is not really being leveraged as well as it could.
mm.
And so it'll be interesting to see how it plays out over the next few legs to see if that changes and then also how that changes my enjoyment of the race because it's become a bit of a not a negative thing, but it's become energetically a more challenging role to take on than I would have signed up for sure.
Mm,
So
yeah.
yeah, we'll see.
I'm really appreciating in this moment how you can bring, like, this is something you're really going through right now. Like, you're processing this and thinking about this right now. And I think it's awesome to hear about it. So thank you.
No, you're welcome. Yeah, yeah, you're right. Like but we're in real time mode right now. We leave on Tuesday next week. And we want to make sure that we have people in the right roles to do what we need to be more successful and more focused on performing well and at the same time taking care of people and making sure that people are able to work together as a team effectively and get all the work that needs to get done on the boat. So we're trying to think about it in new ways. And
Mm,
I appreciate the openness of Mike, our skipper, to look at different ways. And for me, I said to him today, I said, like, whatever role that you feel is the best way for me to contribute, I'll sign up to do that and do it full on. And if that's different titles and different roles and responsibilities, so be it, because I didn't sign up for any of that. Like,
yeah.
I just wanted to be, Andrew the sailor from Canada, and just have a great old time sailing around the world. It's turned into a much bigger thing than that.
Yeah.
But I don't need it to be any bigger than Andrew the sailor, you know.
Yeah. There's an E.B. White uh, quote that a client of mine shared with me recently, and I won't get it exactly, but it's something like, it's really challenging because E.B. White says, because I wake up every morning and part of me wants to save the world, at which they talk about that a little bit differently. But basically what it comes down to is part of me wants to save the world and part of me wants to savor the world. And it's really hard to figure out what to do on a daily basis. And I feel like, does that resonate at all? Like
Oh yeah.
with what's going on right now?
Yeah, yeah, yeah. But partially for me, but also like, one of my good friends, Mara from One Solution, talks about this all the time. She's like, being a bleeding heart and wanting to help everyone and save the world on every topic is, you know, is a daunting task, right? Um, and you see so many ways you can make a difference, and you want to just take it all in and try to do it. But then the next day you can actually be out, for a walk and in nature and just appreciate it for the way it already is.
Mm,
It's like this tennis game back and forth of, which emotion are you going to go with and which
yeah.
of those thoughts do you actually pursue?
Yeah.
Um, so yeah, no, that definitely resonates.
Well, to that end, can you take us into somewhere early on in the Skipper Mike's logs from this race across the roaring 40s of like in like places where very, very, very few people have ever been or will ever be. I mean, like sounds like an
Mhm.
absolutely wild and uh incredible place. Early on in Skipper Mike's logs of this leg, he wrote that you, unless there's another Andrew, he wrote that you had you had gotten the fastest speed at the helm. Like you were
Mhm.
helming and the boat was going really, really fast. And I'm just so curious what it is like, A, to helm a boat that's going really fast, and B, what the sailing experience of this race was for you.
Yeah, I didn't know he had said that. Yeah, well, this leg was quite interesting. So the Roaring Forties are these sort of 40-degree latitude from 40 down to 46, which is as close to Antarctica as we're allowed to get.
Mm.
Um, which takes you quite far south, and into the Antarctic sort of weather systems where there are much, bigger, uh, weather patterns, much colder weather patterns. There's no land getting in the way of any of the weather, so you get bigger waves and big winds. So yeah, that night we had not very big sails up because the wind was very, very strong, and it had been strong for about 2 or 3 days. So we had waves that were probably 20, 25 feet average, and probably some bigger ones. And
Wow.
when I did that, or when the boat, had its sort of maximum speed moment, yeah, I remember the feeling of on the helm of sitting atop a wave that looked like it was about 200 feet high, and and the sense that it's very much like standing on the top of a mountain in Colorado with your skis on, and you look down that double black diamond, and you can't really imagine how steep it looks,
Mm.
and how you're going to survive getting to the bottom. That's the moment. That's the feeling of that moment on the top of the wave.
Wow.
Yeah. And the boat just on its own kind of tilts forward, and starts moving down the wave. And my only job, and any of our helm's job, is to keep it going in a straight line that's safely away from the wave crashing or catching us from the side. So you're sailing at just a few degrees off of a straight line down the wave.
Wow.
And so it's really it's a it's an experience where you're just battling fear, and just staying in a place of focus, to hold the steering wheel and manage the steering wheel and know sort of where you're trying to get to at the bottom of the wave, to be able to sort of slide out a little bit to the side
Mm.
and then up onto the next wave. Because the one thing you don't want to do is to go to the bottom and then come to a slowdown or a stop, and then have that wave catch up to you.
Mm.
Yeah. So, the whole art of surfing waves with a sailboat is very much, to ride it as far as you can, but to know how to get out of it in time that you can start getting onto the next wave, and get lifted up onto the next wave.
Mm.
Um, so it was a thrilling moment. It was an exciting moment. And actually, the record on the boat, I think, has been broken 2 or 3 more times since.
Wow.
Once by somebody else, once again by me, and then once again by somebody else. So it's a it's a fun it's a fun part of our experience on the boat to challenge each other in that way. But yeah, it was not something I would have ever had the experience of before, doing the kind of lake and more casual environment sailing that I've
Yeah.
done. But that this leg is one of the renowned crossings in nautical world. The Southern Ocean, the Southern Indian Ocean, is known for this sort of big weather, big waves, big wind, and
Wow.
definitely delivered. Yeah, a couple of the boats had snow, um, for yeah, through one of the weather systems. So and quite a few damaged boats by the end. Sails ripped and
Mm.
things breaking. So it was a full on for 25 days for sure. It was a exhausting leg.
Wow. I mean, I keep thinking about as you're talking, like I would not have thought that it would be similar to anything. But the
Mm.
comparison, for me, the comparison to skiing really works because I
Mm.
love those really steep, like I love that feeling. And like I can't, I would never have thought that I could imagine what it would be like to helm a boat. I mean, I would be screaming woohoo all the way
Oh
down,
yeah,
I
yeah,
think.
yeah. You
Right? Is that
definitely
what you
hear
did?
some. I didn't, but we definitely have some people on the boat who have the woohoo and more of an auditory approach. Um, yeah,
And
yeah. I
so,
think the only difference from skiing, I think, is in skiing you don't have to worry about the mountain sort of falling on top of you typically,
no,
unless you're
every
unless
every
you're yeah.
every wave, right?
But
Um, I wonder if I mean, because it's different, I think, than like, I don't know, like the difference for me feels like the difference between climbing Mount Washington by on foot or going up the auto road. Like it's you and Mother Nature working in conjunction. Like you're like if in skiing, I think about fall lines, I think about
mm,
you know, like where to place myself in my skis and on what edge and on, and where's my balance and stuff like that. Is it basically like you're on a giant mono ski or a snowboard? I mean, is that the feeling?
yeah, in a lot of ways it is. I mean, I've downhill skied enough to that feeling at the top of how am I going to position myself to safely do this. Um, in a lot of ways, it's a very similar feeling. Yeah,
Mm,
I mean the boat has in its design is designed to go down these waves, to stay flat, and the
mm,
flatter it is, the faster it goes. We have two rudders, and so that the rudders, we know that if we're a little bit heeled to one side or the other, we know we have the sort of dig into the water to turn the boat when we want to turn the boat. But you have to be able to really feel that, and
mm,
when it's really cold and might be wearing gloves, you sometimes lose some of those sensations. And I think the best helming that I do is when you can really feel, like in your hands, you can feel what the boat wants to do. You can feel the energy of the boat and the water in your feet. You
mm.
can feel the wind on your cheeks, right? And
Wow.
and you get the sounds of the ocean and the wind and the waves. And so it's a very kinesthetic experience
Mm.
that, and it's almost impossible not to be completely present and consumed by it all because it's such a powerful experience.
Wow. So before I go romanticizing it too much, which maybe is okay to do. I mean, this like I've seen like people have taken video of
Mm.
clipper race videos even of like the Roaring Forties or these huge big like by the way, a 20-foot wave, which it sounds like was the average that you were seeing, is
Mm.
like as tall as my house,
Yeah,
which is like
yeah,
wow, that is crazy.
yeah,
So
yeah.
you were also saying that it was exhausting. Can you take us into that a little bit?
Yeah, I mean, one of the things on the boat, is constantly moving, and so it's moving side to side, it's moving up and down, it's tilting left and right, and so you are never moving around the boat with ease. You
Mm,
are constantly fighting the energy of the movement of the boat and trying to safely navigate your way around. And even things like moving around the boat to execute some of the moves that we do, and some of the pulling in some of the lines that we pull in, those just like it's like they are amplified in the effort required to execute them.
mm,
And then every once in a while, we have to do some very big maneuvers like change the sail that's up or reduce the size of the sail. And those are like those can take 30 to 60 minutes to complete the entire process.
mm,
And you've got 8 or 10 people working, carrying sails that weigh like 200, 300 pounds. Um, and if the weather's really bad, that knocks you out.
yeah.
So yeah, and we had we had a number of those days, and then, we again ran into a couple of days where we didn't have any wind, and that's
Mhm.
exhausting, more from an emotional exhaustion. Um, but the cumulative effect of it over 25 days is quite exhausting. And so you definitely look forward to getting to shore and getting some sleep and,
Mm,
having a shower and, eating some good food. And because it's hard work.
yeah.
Um, for the vast majority of the time, are working pretty hard.
Mm, mm. Um, Boy, okay. I think what I want to do is come back to some of the questions I have about boat culture, if I can say that. Because I had there's a couple of there are some really interesting questions that have come up from the Facebook group and from our
Mm,
mutual friend Karen Dent. And before we even get to those, what I really wanted to do is just take a moment to talk about our friend Bill Trailing.
mm.
Um, and you know, I feel emotional. I mean, Bill touched my heart in the year plus a little bit over a year that I knew him so very much. And I wondered if you would, because you've known him a lot longer, and I think probably a lot more closely
Mm.
than I did. And I wonder if you would, I don't know, share about Bill Trailing with us.
Yeah. Well, it's interesting how this is tied into to the boat conversation because um, I checked in and sent a message through to Bill through his wife Julia when I was in Cape Town, and
Mm,
there had been a message that he had sort of had a rough patch and was in the hospital and then was showing signs of improvement, but you kind of got the sense that things might not be going very well. And I knew that I was going to be away for 3 weeks, and so I sent through a message, and Julia read it to Bill, and I think he really appreciated it. And so we left Cape Town.
so that was three
I
weeks
don't,
ago. Right. Well,
yeah,
actually, it was a little
yeah,
bit more than a month ago now. Yeah, but
yeah. I think it was on the 18th or 19th of November.
mm,
Um, and a couple of days, maybe 3 or 4 days into the race, every day on the boat we have somebody tells a story.
mm,
So one of the crew shares a story over the lunch hour, and my name came up, and for some reason, hmm, which perhaps we know now,
yeah.
telling the story of Bill came to mind. And
Mm,
so I shared the story about Bill, and I shared the story about going to for we met when I went to a coaching conference for his sport, which was canoeing and kayaking.
mm,
Um, and I went as a swimming coach because I was always curious to learn from other sports and other people, and to see if something in the way they looked at what they do related to what I was doing. And so I sat down at a table, and a couple of minutes later, Bill sat down beside me, and we had a conversation. He told me about being a school teacher and coach, and outdoors guy, and we really hit it off, and we stayed, became close friends and have stayed friends all the way through. Um, and one of the things that Bill needed support on all the way through was he was really hard on himself.
mm,
Um, and he really felt like he wasn't living up to some kind of standard that he believed he should be.
mm,
And one of those things was this relationship that he really desired, which was this lady Julia that he knew very well, and
mm.
had been pursuing for many years. um, and and how um, that had finally come to be, and was such a meaningful part of his life, and how Julia um, was really helping him see actually a different side of himself.
Mm,
Um, and then I think 6 months before he was about to retire from teaching and start this beautiful life, Julia together, this ALS diagnosis comes up, and things very quickly take a turn for the worse.
Mm.
Turn for the worse from a physical perspective, but a turn for an incredible level of deep, deep self-reflection and understanding and vulnerability
Yeah.
that Bill just embraced like unbelievably. And so, and you've seen that, I did an interview with Bill, probably one of the last interviews, well, probably the last interview that's been recorded where he was able to speak
Mm.
and be coherent enough to be able to be understood. And, just to hear where he was at as a human being at that stage was, still is, one of the most meaningful things I've ever done.
Yeah.
And Julia sent me a message the other day telling me she's watched it, something like watches it over and over and over again.
Yeah.
It just as a reminder of what a beautiful human Bill was, and where he left us physically was just with such a profound understanding of how to be a great human being, and how to be kind to yourself.
Yeah.
Um, um, so yeah, I told that story on the boat, which it turns out may have been the day Bill passed or the day after Bill passed,
Mm.
but it was very clear to me I wanted to share the story about Bill for some reason. And yeah, there were no dry eyes on the boat by the
Mm.
time I was done, including me. And I said, I'm not going to know. I don't have email. I don't have any way of, being
Mm.
communicated with. But I'm not going to know how Bill's doing until we arrive in Australia. And we were about half an hour from shore, and my phones start all buzzing, and
Yeah.
and you know, I didn't check. I didn't want to know until we were in Australia.
Mm.
And Monique is here in Australia, and so it was pretty much the first question I asked her was, how's Bill doing? And
Mm.
so she unfortunately had to deliver that news that he had passed just 2 or 3 days after we left Cape Town. So, which I then shared with everybody on the boat, and I shared that interview and the copy of the video, so they could learn a little bit more about my beautiful friend Bill.
Yeah.
So yeah, it's been a tough part of this transition, here in Australia, is to kind of grieve that and go through that from so far away.
Mm.
But knowing that something I had done with Bill, that little interview, has been really helpful for the people who care about Bill. That's a pretty. I'm very grateful
Special.
to know that. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. I hear that. I had similar feelings. So Bill for me, like he had just gotten diagnosed with ALS, with Lou Gehrig's disease when we had our first Global Coach Community virtual retreat in 2022. And
Hmm.
he was such a light at that. He was there for every session. Sometimes mostly he was present, like in, on camera kind of a thing, but he would message, he'd be like, I'm helping my kids set up Halloween decorations. So I'm listening, but I'm not here, right? One time he was
Yeah.
in the car, he was doing something. He was like driving somewhere and he had us like in his pocket. And he was so like the word vulnerable, I think is a really good one. He was so courageous about saying like what does this open up for me? Like here I am. I've got this. This is my life right now. And what are the I remember him saying I have choices I can make. And he ended up coaching people with ALS, others with
Mm.
ALS, until
He did.
he kind of couldn't anymore. And
Yeah.
he shared so beautifully in like just out into the world about the experience of like I remember him now. I mean, Andrew, that I have a history of a tendon condition where for a long time I had almost no use of my hands, my arms,
Hmm.
forearms. And this really resonated with me, I think, for that reason, because he was saying like Sure, my hands can't you can grip things anymore or
Hmm.
whatever, but they still feel like I still feel someone holding my hand. I feel hugs. I feel with my body is doing things now that I'd never noticed before. Like it just
Yeah.
does these things. I was like, wow, that's amazing.
Yeah.
And then I remember too having the like being so we had a house full of people the day that he passed and I just was like, I don't know how to do this. I don't know how do I grieve someone? And what I actually did was I made a painting. And
Mm.
at the beginning of it, I was so angry with the world. And by the end of it, I was really feeling like, I'm so glad I knew this person. And I shared it out into the Salute to Bill Trailing group. And the responses, like it was so lovely to know that, I don't know, there's a sort of just like you were saying about the about your interview with him, your conversation with him. It's like you're giving a gift that is helpful for people and
Yeah.
meaningful, and I just what a wonderful human being. Mm. Here's to Bill Trailing.
Here to that.
Yeah. Yeah. Ooh. And it's interesting because it's an inspiration to do what you love, I think. Like there's that too, right?
No question. Yeah. Yeah. I mean, one of the in that interview, one of the things he and I talked about was this trip that I'm doing, and his desire was that he be there, when when I finish. He'll be there when I
Hmm.
finish. He's there every day.
He's here now.
Yeah, 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 and and we talked to, I think, that's sort of the kick in the pants for all of us, is when you see somebody and you see that they've worked so hard in their life and they've struggled and they've overcome and they've learned a lot of stuff, and they finally get to this moment of almost getting a chance to enjoy it all,
Yeah.
and then it gets snatched away. Yeah, I mean, none of us know. None
Yeah.
of us know when that day is going to be, and um, I think I reflect on the fact that I'm doing what I love to do right now, and having to sacrifice a lot of things to be able to do it, and make a lot of choices to do it. But also fully aware that, yeah, I don't know if I'm going to get sick, or I don't know how long I'm going to be around. Now, I don't even know, that something couldn't happen in the next 6 or 8 months that might change change what my steps are, right? None of that's no. So I think when you go into things with that understanding and you just make choices to follow the breadcrumbs, Minik talks about following the breadcrumbs and saying yes to things. And I think it's a
Mm.
great mindset of, when you're doing what you love to do, and that's the energy you're bringing every day, those breadcrumbs are, the vast majority of them are going to be super interesting, curious
Yeah.
breadcrumbs, right? They're
Yeah.
not going to they're not going to be moldy pieces of bread lying around. They're going
No.
to be lots of different flavors, but all worth trying if you want.
Yeah.
And you can really let go of the notion that you have to know which one's the right one, or which one's the best one, or which one's the
Hmm.
fastest one, or which one's the healthiest one. And just know that they're all good breadcrumbs, because you're on a good path and you're bringing good energy to it, and you're doing it because it's what is meaningful uh, and purposeful for you, which might not be for your neighbor or your spouse or your family. They may not understand it, but if you understand yourself well enough to know what those breadcrumbs represent, then I think it's a beautiful path to take.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, I think you said earlier on, maybe in these conversations, in some conversation that we've had, you're on my Zoom screen. Like, it's funny because, there's not a lot of difference between this sort of container that we're calling Where in the World is Andrew Moss and others. But you have talked about how doing this trek, this around the world circumnavigation in a sailing race is going to give you the guidance and the inspiration to know what's next.
Mm.
And doing that Well, is that the experience of it? Do you feel like that's what I mean, you don't obviously maybe you don't have the guidance or the inspiration yet to know what's next because you're still on it, but like is it,
Yeah.
you know?
I'm being patient to see what unfolds. Yeah. I'm not actually
Yeah.
like I don't go looking for that answer every day. I'm pretty confident that things will appear, opportunities will appear.
Mm,
Just a different way of seeing the world or different values of what matters to me in terms of how I make an impact going forward. All I know is 3 weeks after we finish the race, I get to walk one of my daughters down the aisle for her wedding.
wow.
So that's a great you know um, thing for me to stay focused on, to
Yeah.
stay healthy and ready to be there for that. And then, after that, I'll be able to put my feet up for a few days, I hope, and we'll see what shows up. If it hasn't shown up clearly, then I'll take the time to try to figure it out. And I mean, honestly, it's coaching isn't really it's not a job for me. It's how I
Mm,
show up in the world. So coaching will be part of it. It's just what the context might be, and you know, who's gonna pay the bills, and where
yeah.
that's gonna come from. But I have no doubt that I'll be actively using my skills to try to make a positive difference in the world. And I'm curious to see what that might look like.
I bet it's going to look like saving and savoring.
I think there'll be a little bit of both. Yeah, yeah, there usually is, and there might be some sailing in there as
Yeah,
well.
who
And
knows? Another S,
yeah,
sailing, saving, and savoring. I
yeah,
love
yeah,
it.
yeah, yeah.
All right. Well, Karen Dent asks, what was Andrew running away from, and what was he running toward when he decided to do this race?
Well, that's an interesting question. There's some assumptions in that question, Karen did. I don't think I was running away from anything. I think what I was um, looking for, and so maybe running towards, was just an opportunity to take a breath in my adult uh, life and in my
Mm,
career. Um, and I don't think that didn't come from being burnt out or any of that. But I remember a couple of times when I was go out for my morning walks, wondering if I'd taken time to really pause and reflect on what I might want to continue to do and what I might want to move away from doing, um, and what the best way to maybe do that would be. Um, so I think looking for an opportunity to have a break, a work break, was part of it. But honestly, and I think I'm one of the few people on the boat that really was driven by the sailing experience that I was looking for.
mm,
And to me, I don't know what that represents for me. There's definitely, like, I've always been an adventurous kid. When I was young, I was adventurous. I always was a dreamer. I always, would read books about, adventure and people who did these kinds of things, and would always get wrapped up in those stories. Um, and my parents gave us the opportunity to travel and see the world, and so I knew that there was places to go and people to meet in different parts of the world that I'd be super curious about. Um,
mm.
and so that whole story, and then the Robin Knox Johnson book, and how that tied into the Clipper race, um,
Just for
was
like,
yeah,
just to jump in, like, right, that you read this book about Robin Knox Johnson when you were little.
yeah, yeah, yeah. We had a book about, and Robin was the first person to sail around the world unassisted, single-handed
Mm.
in a sailboat. So, and it was just a remarkable read of, yeah, just, terror and resourcefulness and adventurous. I mean, he's still alive. He's about 85 now. We see him at some of the race stops still because he's
Mm.
still involved in the race.
Because he
Um,
created this race.
yeah, I mean, he finished his experience and had this idea, 10 or so years later that wouldn't it be amazing if we could give normal people the chance to experience what he had experienced?
Mm.
And the Clipper race was designed as a way for people with very little or less sailing experience to have that opportunity, along with people like myself and others who have much more sailing experience and have always dreamed of sailing the world.
Mm.
So yeah, I would not count myself in the group of people trying to come up with the answers to that Karen was looking for. There are definitely people on the boat who fall into those categories of, running away from something, running towards something. Um, but for me, I think it really is much more about the sailing experience and the chance to explore the world and see nature and do those things and to be able to do that in a sailboat, which I've always loved as part of my life, just seemed incredible to me.
Mm. Mm. Very cool. Very cool. Angel has a two-part question. The first part is one, do you ever have moments that you want to give up? And two, if yes to the first question, how do you push through to change your mindset?
Yeah, I mean, there are definitely moments where um, I have thought to myself, I don't have to be doing this right now. Um, and we lived in Costa Rica last year, um, and thinking about those days in Costa Rica, which while they were very repetitive, the idea of morning walks on the beach, breakfast, overlooking the sunrise, you know, coaching by the swimming pool, and then sunset walks and dinner. That wasn't so bad. And when you've got huge waves and driving rain and cold and grumpy people. Yeah, there's definitely moments where you question, you're like, why did I sign up and do this? And
Mm.
do I really want to spend another 8 months doing this? Um, and the answer to this, the second question is an answer that's universal to any of the negative thoughts that really come up in my life, which is depending on the intensity, it's a matter of just letting them be and not engaging with them and not trying to fight them and not trying to push them aside or push them down, but just acknowledging that it's just a thought. It's just this one little cloud going over my head that has this message of, questioning myself. And if I just wait a little bit, that cloud's going to move on by just like all the others do.
Mm.
And then those that slip by and we grab a hold of, and they become more we become more engaged in that question. A good night's sleep is a good way to let all of that stuff quiet down, and by the time you wake up in the morning, it's very rarely still around. um,
Yeah.
and our watch system means that I get to sleep every 4 to 6 hours. So I have lots of times for naps to let go of any of that negative, baggage that might be hanging around.
Yeah. Like it's interesting too, because what comes up is you've talked a little bit about uh the idea that there isn't a lot of like connected sleep on the boat.
No.
And I like it's interesting because it it seems like, well, I don't know if this is true, but having observed you kind of do this several times, it feels like what's happening is you're getting adapted to that. Like, is that true?
Yeah, it seems to be true. Yeah. That a 2 to 3 hour sleep um, gets you right back energetically to be sharp and ready to go for another 4 to 6 hour watch.
Cool.
And Yeah, and so you don't yeah, it's the discipline is to really take the sleep when it's there and when it's available. And part of that is learning how to sleep during the day and during weird hours.
Mm,
And that took a little, it probably took about 3 weeks for me to get to the point where I could sleep during the day and sorry, during off hours more consistently. And then it's also very weather dependent because the
mhm,
boat is not comfortable to sleep on, especially when it's moving violently in the weather. It also is a bit of an oven, so it gets very hot, very lots of condensation. So you're getting rained on from the roof all the time. So it's not pleasant for sleep, but sleep is one of those mindfulness tools that I think for anybody that's dealing with negative thoughts or questions or fears and doubts, just acknowledging them, not giving them any more weight than a positive thought or right, and just saying, well, it's just a thought that happened to show up today.
mhm.
Um, go for a walk, have a nap, go to sleep, and move on. Start your next day. And it sounds simplistic, but for me, it's been the true tool to learn how to be a much more mindful person is to
Mm.
just learn how to give those thoughts way less weight, way less importance, um, and then to have some ways to let them, float away when I want to.
Ah, very cool. Very cool. And I can see how useful it's been for you. Like it's why you're been, having the experience that you're having and sounds like.
Hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, well, this has been very helpful for me long before the sailing started. I mean, it learning how to do that is probably the fundamental skill that let me find a way to live a much more peaceful and happy life intentionally every day.
Mm,
Um, because if you start your day and just choose to be happy as the default, um, and you notice when there are thoughts that and thoughts even with emotions attached to them that are trying to dissuade you from being happy, as long as you can notice them and have some tools on how to let them just dissipate,
yeah.
then it's not that hard to stay in a state of relative happiness, whatever that might mean for somebody.
Mm,
Um, and so, yeah, I mean, it's not about sitting on a cushion for hours on end, trying to get your mind to be quiet. It's really only a recognition that our experience of life is a, a series of thoughts, and some of which we choose to shine a light on, and some of which we don't.
mm.
And those that we shine a light on at the end of the day, you put all those together and you have the movie that was your day.
That's beautifully said. Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah.
And those that you didn't shine a light on, are on the cutting room floor and didn't end up being part of your experience. And
Mm,
so that's that's the very thing we teach the kids in Chicago with One Solution. Like that's what we teach them, right? Is
mm,
that they're having an experience of life that they get to be the sort of director and editor of based on what they shine a light on and what they choose to just let go by and not do anything about.
mm. Wow. Epic. Epic.
It's the most powerful thing when you learn that and then relate it to your own life in a consistent way.
Yeah.
And you and I have talked about this before because for me the sailing race is a far more extreme situation to test that in. And for you, when you did your hike across England, it's one thing to do that in your day-to-day life, you know, as a mom, as a wife, as a coach, as a community member. Then you throw in, oh, I'm going to walk across England, which uncovers a whole bunch more stuff.
Hmm.
And you find more, thorns and more areas that still trigger you, right?
Yeah.
But
Yeah.
but that's great because those are more things that you can learn how to deal with. And once you've learned how to deal with them, then you can have a much more peaceful approach to trying new things and trying harder things and trying different things in your life, because you've proven that you have the ability to cope with whatever might get uncovered when you do those things.
Yeah. I think about being there and doing that. Like there were about 3 days where I thought I'd actually broken my foot.
Mhm.
And the question I would ask myself was, is this the moment where I'm calling mountain rescue? And we've talked about the taxi voice that sometimes would come up, like, are you going to call a taxi right now?
Mhm.
And to be able to know in myself, and I don't think this is true of somebody who's doing what you're doing, somebody who did what I did. It's true for anyone, right? That we have the capacity. There were entire huge swaths of those 3 days where I was not feeling my foot at all. I was absorbed into the landscape. I was observing and being like, wow, this is incredible. Holy mackerel. I just heard a cuckoo. I thought cuckoo birds were extinct, but no, it turns out they're not. Like,
Yeah.
you're right. It's what you pay attention to. It's what you pay attention to. So, wow. Um, I'm gonna spell this person's name and ask you to pronounce it because it sounds like you know them. Taras.
Yes. Terrace. Yeah.
Terrace. Terrace
Terrace was
asks.
a very talented national and international level swimmer for Canada,
Wow.
that I got a chance to meet, I think quite late in his career. Um, and yeah, I was fascinated to hear what question he might have.
Well, this is it. What has been the hardest part of this adventure? Is it the psychological part? And if so, please give details. Or is it the physical part or emotional? Whatever they are, Andy, I know you are able to overcome all of them. Keep it up.
Wow. Um, yeah, as we've discussed, I think today and a little bit in previous talks, I'd say it's definitely more on the psychological side, probably a little bit on the emotional side as well,
Mm.
of staying in a good level state of presence, while there's sort of chaos going on around. And one of the specifically, I think one of the challenges has been that um, having experience as a sailor and a racer before, um, I really want to. I found myself really wanting to be uh, more relied on,
Mm.
um, for some of the sailing related aspects of what we're doing there and the racing related decisions. And I think one of the things I've struggled with the most so far has been to not, how I've dealt with not having the opportunity to have input and to be involved in that, and to feel like I was getting given instructions that to me didn't make sense given
Mm.
what was going on. Um, and yet, knowing that my role on the boat is to deliver on what our two professional sailors are instructing us to do, and to make sure that my teammates are also following through on those instructions. And so I think I have struggled at times with how do I just manage myself better when those situations happen, so that I can be curious about why are we doing that and ask it in a respectful way so I can understand it and relate it to my team, and also to evolve my relationship with our skipper and assistant, so that I can be part of those conversations and I can be more involved uh, in making decisions that impact the racing side of what we're doing.
Mm.
So yeah, like specifically, that's probably the area that on a personal level I've I've been working through. Beyond, all the other things we've talked about the interpersonal stuff with teammates and all the rest. But the my own little thorns and my own little demons that still show up are really around probably something around self-worth and being recognized for for my
Mm.
skill, and wanting to have a chance to get recognized for that, as opposed to just uh, being told what to do and being a robot, to do
Mm.
those things. So yeah, that's probably a deeper question, answer than I was expecting was going to come out to that. But that's the true answer, probably, if you were watching it all unfold on reality TV.
Yeah.
Uh, Andrew, Andy's ability to take direction, when he's not loving the direction that's coming, is the biggest challenge, and that will come as no surprise to people that have worked with me before, because I was very it was very challenging to be, an employee, during my
Mm.
career. I was much better making decisions and living with them and learning and adapting than I was in taking direction from people. So that's playing out again on the boat, but I have a sense that there are opportunities in the future that are going to allow me to be a little more fulfilled on those in those ways.
Wow. And again, I just think of the courage to really be able to reflect in this moment and just how inspiring that is, right? Like to go deep.
Yeah, well, yeah, there's no real point in sort of bullshitting to yourself because yourself knows the truth. So,
Yeah, and if there's a misalignment there, if you're not acknowledging the truth, right?
yeah, yeah.
That's where the challenges show up. Wow, thank you, and Terrace, thank you for such a cool question, like
Mhm.
a question that allowed so much depth, right? Ashley asks, what has surprised him about this trip so far?
Mm. Great to hear, Ashley. Ashley is one of my favorite human beings. She's lives in Winnipeg. She's an amazing entrepreneur and innovator. She just got married, so congratulations, Ashley.
Woohoo!
Um, what has surprised me? I think the thing would probably be, um, I don't know if I've already said this on this recording, but, um, my uh, the sense of wonder and awe that I feel being out in the ocean, uh, with no sight of land for as long as we do.
Mm.
And this idea that, when we're in school and they teach us that the earth is 70% water, uh, and it seems like a fun fact. When you're out in the ocean for 21 days straight and don't see any land, you'd have a hard time convincing me that the earth wasn't 99% water, because it just feels so vast. And we're sailing in water that is 3 to 5,000 feet deep, or meters deep. So
Oh, wow, that
10,000
is, yeah.
feet, right? And you're seeing, underwater volcanoes that, maybe rise up to like 1,500 meters below, right?
Wow.
Which are like mountain ranges
Yeah.
underneath the sea, right? And I think what surprised me is just how awe-inspiring being in very remote parts of our planet, how inspiring that can be.
Mm.
Um, the stars at night, oh my God, like there are like we had Jupiter behind us, we had Venus in front of us, we had a couple of nights when the moon wasn't out, and we had basically like a light show going on from these planets, guiding us,
Wow.
and then stars right down to the horizon, all around us. And being in the southern hemisphere, we had the Southern Cross,
Oh,
we had
wow.
the whole thing. And then there's a meteor show the last couple of nights. So we're seeing these meteors going off. And then I think it was the night before we arrived, Starlink, which is one of the Elon Musk companies, that their internet company, launched a new set of satellites. And we saw the satellites go over top of us in this sort of
Wow.
stream about 30 to 40 dots, all perfectly sequenced and aligned. And you could have, it looked like the aliens were coming, and we were all, you know. Uh, so, you sit and watch that. You sit and watch. There was a day when we had like 17 albatross birds flying around our boat. And, an albatross, they get a wingspan up to like 3 to 4 meters wide. And
Oh
so
my God. So that's like
these,
15 or more feet.
yeah, and they don't flap their wings. They just glide, and
Wow.
they go up and down, and they just use their body movement to create, uh, you know, change direction. And they started off very cautious with the boat, and then they gradually got more and more comfortable, and they would come really close to the boat and use the wind, currents and the little that we were creating, and they would play with them as they
Oh
went
my
by, right?
gosh.
And you had this sense that we were being observed, and we were the one out of place. Like, it wasn't like, going and seeing some dolphins like at a dolphin show. It was like we were the human show for all of
Hey, come and
nature.
see these. Come and see these
Exactly.
humans.
These wacky people. Yeah, so I think that the awesomeness of that, and I know that's an often overused word, but it's the right word
Mm,
for that setting, is how unbelievably awesome it is to be in nature and be such a tiny speck of the grandness of the nature that you're part of.
wow.
Um, yeah, I'm gonna want to have more of that in my life for sure coming out of this.
Yeah.
Yeah,
To really feel a part of it all.
yeah.
Yeah. Wow. Woo. I mean, it makes so that was our last question from the Facebook group, which by the way, join the Facebook group and then you get to
Oh,
ask questions too.
I thought there was a question from Ian as well
Oh, hold on. Let me
about,
see.
it was a very sailing specific question, and I only know that because uh, Ian is the skipper of our boat in Toronto that I race on, and I think he asked some kind of question about sailing in the very light winds.
Wow. So, um, well, maybe you can.
Yeah, I'll fill in the gap
Oh,
because I
hold
saw.
on, hold on, hold on.
Oh,
Um, uh, it was asked, but it was just asked in a different question, I think, in a different place. Okay, Ian says, congrats, he says. You made it in. My question is about the light wind days. I imagine
mhm.
keeping a big boat going in the right direction when faced with light wind and swells is challenging, frustrating, and takes intense concentration. How did the crew cope with that, and how did you help keep them focused and motivated?
I love the last part of that because that's that's the thing that I try to do on Ian's boat, is to keep everybody
Ah.
focused and motivated. And so I'm chuckling, and because I know he's chuckling when he wrote that. It's a great question because it is a huge boat. It's like fully loaded. I think it's 65,000 pounds or something like that. And the worst thing you possibly can do is allow it to stop. Because
Mm,
the amount of energy that it takes to get it going again is incredible. And in sailing, you have this effect where when the boat is actually moving, it's also creating its own wind. And so you get what's called apparent wind, which is a wind that's being created. It's the wind that actually is coming from Mother Nature, but it's also the wind that's coming from moving through the wind
mm,
is creating even more wind. And so when you start moving, you actually start creating more wind for the boat. The challenge is, and to be honest, Ian, we have not been very good at this yet, is that you have to really balance that desire to go when the wind is there. You have to balance that with going in a direction that makes sense for where you're trying to get to.
mm.
And I'd say too often so far, we have tried chasing what we thought was wind and ended up sailing in circles, like literally in circles. If you look at our race viewer, we
Wow.
have done we have done hours of sailing when we covered maybe 10 or 15 miles, but only made maybe 1 mile of headway towards the finish line because we were going round and
Oh.
around because the wind was shifting, which when it's very light, it has and light wind, especially in these big ocean weather patterns, happens when you have colliding weather systems. You might have, right, two big weather systems. And when they're colliding, they're still moving, but they're moving and they're being opposed by another one. The winds are constantly changing. And so I'd say to Ian's question, like the biggest thing we need to learn how to do is to point the boat in the direction that we want to go and to be more patient to take the wind when it comes and when it's helpful and to be less reactive to things that might be short-term gains and instead take a longer term approach to actually making sure we're going in the right direction. I know that one night that I spoke of when we sailed 15 miles but only made 1 mile of headway, if we had just pointed the boat east, which is the direction we were trying to go, trimmed the sails, tied them down, and done nothing but hold the rudder still for 6 hours, we would have easily gone 10 or 11 miles just from the amount of wind that did show up and the wave patterns and the currents that were there. We would have done at least 10 more miles than we actually did just by being consistent. And my coaching mind can't help but link this as an analogy for a lot of people, because that's also when people are trying to achieve new things. That's also the reality of what happens is the winds are never always kind to you. You're going through this, I'm sure, and others that are going through this in their coaching businesses or whatever, launching a new venture or maybe going through school or whatever it is for somebody. It's like, and the winds are not always going to be favorable, but if you learn how to point yourself in the right direction, and take the opportunities when they're there, be patient when they're not there, and not chase everything that appears, you end up making a lot more headway in the long run. And we need to get better at that, specifically for the sailing race. And I think that is one of the areas where I think I can be more helpful and have a more impactful role if I'm more involved in some of that, because those are the moments when I get really frustrated on the boat, when I'm being told to keep changing the direction of the boat, when I know that in 5 minutes the wind's going to be from another direction and we're going to have to undo what we just did, and we're only barely moving. So even steering the boat is a bit of a nightmare. So Ian probably knew the answer to the question, but I appreciate him asking it. And I hope everything's going well for Ian. I guess the boat will be up on land as winter has arrived in Toronto, but I look forward to sailing again next summer when we get back.
Very cool. There is a poet named Rumi who lived not like in the 1940s, which when I first read his stuff, that's what I thought, but in fact, 800 years ago. And he talks, there's a passage where he talks about when I chase after what I think I want, nothing goes right, basically. Like that's where real problems happen. But when I sit here in my place of patience and know that everything that I want is coming towards me, that's what really works. And it's making me think that it sounds very similar,
Totally. It's absolutely similar. And, we will get better at that, as in this race. But we'll also learn a lot about, how to do that. And, and I say that the collective we, which includes our skipper and our assistant skipper, is to trust that. And it's a hard thing to do when you think, you're making decisions tactically that are going to help you in the short term, because everybody wants to get the boat moving. Everybody's motivated to get the boat moving. But if the best way to get the boat moving is to just consistently go in the direction that you want to go. Trim the sails for that, and be patient.
Mm. Patience, baby.
Patience. It's a tough thing, but it pays off. So yeah, I'm looking forward to seeing. We don't like the light winds. We don't, and people that have been following us might wonder if this is true or not, but we really have not purposely gone looking for it. But when we found it, boy, we've done a lot of harm to ourselves and how we've handled it. So I'm hoping we're going to improve in that area very quickly.
So this really brings me to I think as we're wrapping up too. I was curious about, well, I mean, I'm wicked curious about how you're doing in Assassin, which is like my favorite thing that I hear about on the boat is the playing of Assassin.
Mm.
But I think that there's a larger question too, and I totally want to know how you're doing in Assassin, but there's a larger question, which is like you had said something once about not about being competitive, but not in such a way that it breaks the culture on the boat. And
Mm.
I'm curious about how you're viewing that now and what that culture is and, how it's changed
Yeah.
maybe.
Yeah. Well, I'm still alive in Assassin, you'll be pleased to know. So yeah, we've played it twice and I've not been killed. I did end up in a stalemate with somebody in the first game, so
Yeah.
we just kind of bowed out because it wouldn't have made any difference. And yes, I'm alive. Well, I made it all the way through this last game without being killed. So, and there were some very weak attempts at my at me by some people that should have known better. But so far I'm doing all right. Yeah,
What was
I don't.
oh, well, so I'm curious, what like, so it's a bit like Clue, right? So it's
Yeah.
you're the victim and there's a
Mhm.
place on the boat and there's a weapon, a quote
Yeah.
weapon. So like when you're handed something or whatever, like what is that for you? What have they been trying to do?
Yeah, so the first game, it was a can of gravy, or a tin of gravy, had to be handed to me on the foredeck, which is like the part of the boat in front of the mast.
Mm.
Um, and so, uh, yeah, I mean, I was up there doing something that, with one of the sails, and Dave from Northern Canada comes along and tries to hand me this tin of gravy. I just looked at him and I thought to myself, like, it was so obvious what
What
was
was
going on.
happening?
Yeah. So that was more his lack of creativity that was at play
Mm.
there. And then in the last game that just wrapped up, the last attempt at my well-being was a a croc shoe
Okay.
um, in the forward bathroom of our boat, and the crew member Lorenzo tried to fake a foot cramp uh, right outside the door of the washroom. As I was getting ready to exit, he faked that he had fallen and had a foot cramp, and was reaching up to asking me to hold on to his croc, which I thought to myself, even if you do have a foot cramp, I have no interest in holding onto your Crocs. And so I just stepped over him and said, I think you're going to be just fine, Lorenzo. So yes, I'm not that gullible, it turns out, in that game. But I'm also not I haven't been a great assassin yet, so I need to get up my
Ah,
game on the other side so I actually can advance through the game because um, yeah, I've had some near attempts, and nobody's caught on to what I've been trying to do, but I've almost got a couple people, but not quite so far.
thank you, because I was wondering, like, why aren't you winning? If you're not dying, why aren't you
Yeah,
winning? Well, that makes sense. Like you're not
yeah,
winning because you're also not killing anybody else
advancing
in
and
assassin.
not
Yeah. Yeah.
taking out people. Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah,
Yeah. Cool. Well, thank you. There is something about that just really appeals to me.
yeah, yeah,
What fun you can get up to on the boat, you know?
yeah, yeah. And one of just one of the things you mentioned right at the start of the interview around time zones is actually one of the really interesting things about being out on the boat is I think from Cape Town to Australia, I think we changed by 6 time zones.
Mm.
So every 3 to 4 days, we would move the clocks ahead an hour.
Yeah.
Um, and you kind of have to, because it starts getting light at like 3 o'clock in the morning all of a sudden, and you're like,
Mm.
we really need to change the clocks because this is getting a little wacky with when the sun's coming up and going down. So,
Wow.
so yeah, it's fun. We pay attention to that. Obviously, we try to stay in line with any nearest country or time zone, place that would be in the same time zone. So when we get into that region, even if it might be thousands of miles north or south of us, then that's when we move the clocks ahead. And we typically do it so that one shift gets a half an hour shorter work session, and the other group gets half an hour shorter sleep session, and then we make up the hour together after lunch,
Oh, cool.
so that it's a more balanced impact.
Yeah.
Yeah, so
Yeah.
those are time zones.
And like the sort of intersection of competitive racing
Oh,
and
yes,
boat
yes.
culture. Yeah. Yeah.
Oh, this is an interesting one. This could be a whole episode, to be honest, because I think, um, yeah, it's a fine balance. And what I'm learning and what we're learning is that clearly there's people with different levels of competitiveness on the boat. One of the aspects is also that some people have signed up to do longer parts of the race, and others have only signed up to do like one part of the race.
Mhm.
And we have noticed that those who sign up for the shorter distances are not always that engaged in the racing side of it quite as much. Um, and that may be overstating it, but I think in general that they're signing up for a specific experience that they want to have, whether that be to sail the Southern Indian Ocean, or to sail around Australia, or to sail across the Pacific, right? It's a more experiential goal than competitive
And we want to
around the
win
race.
this race. Yeah.
Right. So, and then how you balance off trying to give them the experience they want with trying to also be competitive in the race is, we have not sort of figured out the right balance yet. I think that's one of the areas that we need to work on, is that you can't accommodate everybody's experiential dreams and have the boat perform at its best. So it's a trade-off, and
Mm.
you've got to figure out where that line is, and be very open with people that we are trying to race, and that there may be times where you don't get a chance to steer the boat because we're in a very competitive situation, or a very tricky situation with the wind or the waves or the weather, and we just need to have a shorter bench when it comes to how many people are
Mm.
there in the boat, or doing different jobs. So that's sometimes can be challenging, depending on how much people's egos get hurt by those
Mm.
decisions.
Well, it's
But
interesting because you bring up the idea of a shorter bench, and that immediately makes me remember the days of, somebody's picking teams
yep,
and you're the last person picked, or you're the
mhm,
right. So wanting to make sure that people have the experience of really being able to take part in the way that they want to. It sounds like that's kind of what you're speaking to. And also, right now we need somebody who's got this experience and can do this.
right,
And that's not
yeah,
you.
right.
Maybe.
And so that is a big part of the role that I have as one of the watch leads, is to make sure that when there are opportunities for growth and development and learning, that we bring the new people in, integrate the new people into those, provide lots of coaching and support, and then when the situation is a little more intense, is to be really, really open and communicate well that this is what we're going to do. We're going to use 4 people for the next 3 hours because we really need to deliver on the opportunity right now. And then we'll get the rotation back going again once we've done that.
Mm,
And if you do that and you do it respectfully and just be very open about why you're making the
yeah.
decision. People have been very, very welcoming to those. And there's been a couple of shifts when I've had to steer the boat for 4 hours straight because there wasn't somebody on our watch who could have safely maneuvered the boat through the situation we were in.
Mm,
And so, being able to communicate that and say, look, guys, like, I'm going to do this for the next 4 hours. And what I need from all of you is support, coffee, tea, water. Um, if, to execute all the other things that need to be happening on the boat really, really well. And people were receptive to that. So, but it's a fine balance. And,
mm,
this is an experiential event, the Clipper race. And the race just adds the intensity to ensure that people are doing it in a way that's, I don't know, safe, but also uh, they're being pushed. They're being pushed to test themselves. It's not a 3-year cruise around the world. It's, 11 months packed into 15 races.
yeah.
Um, and it's intense. And that intensity is meant to help bring out things in people. And but it is a fine line. So uh,
Fascinating. Yeah.
yeah, yeah, it's a big, when we onboard people, those are the kinds of questions we're asking about where their motivations are and how important the racing is to them and what they'd like to get out of the experience, what kinds of specific roles they'd like to learn. And then we have to manage those expectations.
Mm, yeah. Yeah. So, can you take us into a moment that on this leg, on this race, for this past race that was really special, sort of magnificent, breathtaking, like wowzers?
Yeah, I think about a week out of Cape Town, we had humpback sightings, probably, I don't know, maybe a mile and a half off the boat.
Wow.
And it looked like there was about 3 or 4 of them, and a couple of small ones, and then a couple of big parrots.
Yeah.
Um, and they were putting on a show like you've never seen, like big jumps and flips and you
Out of
know
the water?
oh yeah, like way out and then turning and putting up this huge splash, and they did that for probably half an hour, 45 minutes. So that was definitely really awe-inspiring. We saw some, they're called right whale dolphins.
I wanted
So
to
they're,
ask about that. Thank you. Yes.
yeah,
What is a
yeah,
right whale dolphin?
yeah. So right whale dolphin is, well, it's obviously a dolphin from the right whale family of whales, which are typically very sort of docile. Uh, they're very oily, heavy fat whales that are good fishing whales. They don't do much, like they just kind of float along the ocean, and but they're massive.
Mm,
But somehow these dolphins have evolved from there, and they only live in the very southern parts of the planet. And one of the cool features about them is they have no top fin. Um, so they have a
wow.
tail, they have side fins, but they have no top fin. And the theory, reading some of the books about them, is that they would have too much heat loss by having an appendage that was out of the out
Oh,
of the water. Um, so they've evolved to not have that top fin, and they've figured out other ways to maneuver because of how cold the water temperature is and the air temperature is down
wow.
there. So that was, yeah, seeing them was pretty
Special.
cool.
Yeah.
Yeah. And then probably the star shows that I already talked about
Yeah.
were just crazy.
Yeah.
So yeah, I mean, lots and lots of things, but definitely all nature related
Mm.
would be the things that would come to mind.
Wow. Oh, thank you. That's epic. And well, I think this might be two answers, right? Where are you headed next? Where in the world will you be next? And then where in the world will we talk to you again?
Hmm.
And I don't know if they're two different answers. I can't remember, but we'll see.
Yeah, so this next leg is around Australia. So we're on the west coast right now, and we will end up on the northern part of the east coast.
Hmm.
So we're on the southern part of the west coast, and we're going to go what would look on a map as underneath Australia,
Okay.
between Australia and Antarctica. We'll go outside of Tasmania, so on the yeah, not between Australia and Tasmania, but outside of Tasmania, and then we'll circle around up north of Sydney to a place called Newcastle. We'll have a short stop there, and then we'll continue on to a place called Airlie Beach, which is up in the area near the Great Barrier Reef and an area
Oh,
called Whitsundays, which are this chain of islands and just a beautiful, beautiful part of the world. So, yeah, this is the Australia leg, which is broken into two races. Should be about, it looks like 2 weeks or to maybe 3 weeks at the worst if the wind's really light for the first race.
hmm.
And the second race should only be 7 or 8 days. So it'll be a quick
Oh, wow. A
sprint.
quickie. Yeah.
Hmm. Yeah.
So, where will we talk to you again?
Yeah, we'll probably talk from Airlie Beach so that at the end of the Australia leg, and that'll be an interesting time because from there we head north into Halong Bay, Vietnam.
Mm.
And so we do Vietnam and then we do a couple stops in China before doing the big crossing to Seattle, which
Uh,
it certainly will be, a leg that, is very, it's very similar to the one we just finished. It's going to be very rough, very cold, very typically intense weather. Uh, but it'll also be a chance to be sailing back towards something that feels like home again. And um, so I'm curious about that. But for now, we're super excited. Obviously, it's Southern Hemisphere, so trying to get into the holiday spirit because it's I don't know, about 85 degrees or 30 Celsius today, and Christmas decorations don't really make sense when you see them up.
Very true.
But
Very true.
but yeah, it's a nice time to be down here and to enjoy the great weather. And Australia is such an awesome place, and to see it by sailboat is a real special opportunity for me. So I'm looking
Very
forward to
cool.
it. Mhm.
Yeah, yeah. Well, thank you for taking us into all this. This is what a great conversation. I feel like oh so fortunate to be able to have this conversation with you and then to bring it out to others too. So
Yeah, well, thank you again for doing this. I really appreciate it. It's helpful for me to kind of document this in a different way than I'm not real good writing it all out and documenting my experience. So this has actually proven to be a really, really helpful way for me.
cool, cool. Well, I'm glad of
Yeah.
that too. Yeah.
Hmm.
And I think I started to say this before, but then I something else happened. So if like people want to, the Facebook group, the Climb Aboard Andy's Adventure Facebook group is a
Hmm.
really great place to be just because that's where like this time Monek actually was like posting pictures and video of when you were first arriving and that's also where we get to that's where I'm saying, "Hey, we're going to record. So jump in with your questions." And that's a lot of fun and I think the other thing that I want to remember to mention is just to invite people if you're inspired by listening and viewing. Um, there's a couple of places, right? There's the UNICEF fundraiser that your boat has going on, that
Hmm.
folks might want to donate to. And then there is your sort of personal, like, year off of coaching sabbatical kind of like adventure contributions, which I'm inviting people now to join me because I just donated to that.
Hmm.
I'm
Thank
enjoying
you.
this so much. Yeah, sure, absolutely. This is a huge inspiration. So.
Yeah, the GoFundMe is it's been really inspiring to see the support that's come in and to see some of the names attached to the support and to know that they're out there cheering me on. It means a lot, and practically it helps a lot, to be honest. It's an expensive year, not just doing the sailing, but not working at the same time.
Mm.
And so every little bit helps. And one of my beautiful daughters, as I mentioned, is getting married. So on top of that,
Yay.
I did the financial planning didn't account for that one, but um, that's all good. I'm very happy to help pay for that.
Yeah.
Uh, but yeah, honestly, every little bit helps, and I know times are challenging for people and that, but as you said, if anything that I'm doing or that we've been talking about is inspiring or helpful, and you'd like to help out a little bit, buy me a beer, buy me a dinner, buy me a new t-shirt when the old ones get a little too smelly to keep wearing
Yeah.
them. Every little bit makes a difference, and it's greatly appreciated.
You know what's interesting too? There are people in my life who are like, well, he must have he must have money. He must have
Mm,
like so much money because otherwise how do you do this? And I think a thing that's been really inspiring for me is that you have basically said, well, you know what? Like I don't want to let finances hold me back from doing this thing. And with the consideration of like I want to give my daughter a wonderful wedding. I want other things in like, right? So yeah.
of course. Yeah. Yeah, I mean, again, a whole nother episode on the psychology of money. But
Yeah.
um yeah, I think that, you know, I I not just I'm a Nick, and I made decisions to live a different lifestyle, which included selling our house and selling a lot of our belongings and having the freedom that came from that to travel more and to be more flexible in where we lived and how we lived.
Mm.
And so part of this year for me is that, my housing, my food, my transportation, my entertainment, um, you know, it's my insurance, like it's all included. My vacation, like it's all included in what it's costing to do Clipper. But yeah, I mean, you also see, different parts of the world that the cost of living is vastly different, and so there's still expenses, but stepping away from a year of coaching, which is in a lot of cases a sort of a time for money exchange. It's tough to take a year away and then to trust that you're going to come back uh, and create new opportunities. But honestly, getting over that fear, I think as soon as we figured out, if we sell the house and we get rid of some belongings and we have some money and we spend it wisely, uh, there's enough there.
Mm.
And if, that's a big hurdle for people. And I think I remember one of the moments actually was with a financial planner who had taken all of our information and our goals and had run the numbers and said, yeah, this is no problem. And we were like, really? Because we had made up a story kind of like you said that oh, there's no way we can do this. So yeah, I think the psychology of money and expenses and having courage that you can go out and create new opportunities, and that you're growing as a human will mean that you bring more value to whatever you do next, which will be compensated for. Those are things that you got to play out in your own mind and make your own decisions around. But there are so many creative ways to help pay for things like this.
Yeah.
It shouldn't be the thing that holds you back.
Yeah. Well said. Well said. Well, thank you. It's getting so late for you there.
Okay.
And I'm just so appreciative of this conversation. What fun.
That's been great. Yeah, I appreciate it. And thanks for agreeing to do this on a Saturday morning for you.
Oh God, of
Um,
course. Yeah.
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. So, and I hope everybody enjoys it out there, and we hope everybody has a great holiday season. As I said, we'll be celebrating Christmas somewhere south of Australia on a sailboat.
Wow.
Um,
And right now we're only
but
10 days or 9 days out from Christmas, something like that. So
that's
this
right.
is
Yeah.
happening
Yeah,
soon.
we leave on Tuesday, so that'll be the 19th. So yeah, 6 days
Wow.
till Christmas, and then I think our first stop will be a couple of days after New Year's. Um, I don't know if we'll be close enough to Sydney to see their fireworks show, but we'll have Christmas and New Year's out on the ocean, and then arrive on the other side of Australia in 2024. So
Wowee.
yeah, yeah.
Woo. Well, Merry Christmas and Happy New Year to you and to the whole
Thank you.
crew of the PSP. And
Thank you. Yeah,
um,
and for those that follow the social media stuff, we will have a media person on our boat on this leg,
oh
which means
yes.
yeah, so there'll be a lot more content that comes in, a lot more. You probably see me on video sometimes being interviewed, and some of the behind the scenes action. And we have a lot of character on our boat, so it'll make for entertaining viewing, I'm pretty sure. Yeah.
Oh, how wonderful. I've been curious about that because you do see some of the other boats have had videos and have had things
Yeah.
like that. So hooray. All
Mhm.
right. Well, safe travels, Happy New Year, and we'll see you next year. I love being able to say that.
See you next year from the other side. Yeah. Take care.
Yeah. Yeah, you too. Thank you for listening. Where in the World is Andrew Moss is produced by me, Kay Locke Culp. If, like me, you're inspired by Andrew's journey, you can follow along in his Facebook group, Climb Aboard Andrew's Adventure. The link is in the show notes. Also, this is the longest time that Andrew has been away from his family and his work. He truly has no idea what lies on the other side of this adventure. You can contribute to Andrew's adventure costs and help soften the blow of a year away from his beloved coaching practice by donating to his GoFundMe at the link in the show notes. And Andrew asks that you consider making a donation to his boat's UNICEF fundraiser, also at the link in the show notes. Thank you for listening and for supporting Andrew if you can. Join us next time when once again we answer the question, where in the world is Andrew Moss?